Amidst the lavish party, the arrogant millionaire sneered, dumping a bucket of water on the waitress. "You only deserve to wipe my feet." Everyone laughed until she looked up and spoke a sentence that silenced the entire ballroom. Just hours later, the whole world knew her name. You won't believe this girl's true identity. Follow the entire story to find out who this girl really is. The sound of the vacuum cleaner echoed through the Vega Hotel lobby, blending with the click of leather shoes, the clinking of glasses, and the faint laughter of the elite. Elena Morales knelt, her dry, cracked hands gripping the mop. Her eyes darted to the wall clock. 15 minutes until the gala began. If she could just finish cleaning the central area, she would be able to leave and hold the only paycheck large enough to buy medicine for her brother. The old phone in her pocket vibrated softly. The screen displayed a cold message from the hospital. Diego requires an additional $217 payment. If not received, treatment will stop tonight. Elena bit her lip hard. She switched off the screen, hid the phone in her pocket, trying not to let her colleagues see her hands tremble. Just get through tonight, she told herself. Just get through tonight, and the medicine money will be here for him. Across the lobby, dozens of staff members rushed around. The scent of expensive perfume mingled with the smell of floor wax. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers. "Please take your seats. The chairman of the Vega Group, Mr. Leonardo Vega, is about to take the stage." A wave of applause erupted. Elena looked up. Through the mirrored wall, she saw the man in the black suit walking toward the podium, tall, with a composed face and a smile practiced to perfection. Under the lights, he was like a stone statue in a golden world. Every gaze was fixed on him, and she only saw a man who had forgotten how to look down at anyone. A logistics staff member hurried past, carrying a coffee tray. He stumbled, the cup tilted, and a few drops of coffee spilled onto the floor, right next to the speaker's podium. Elena instinctively stooped to wipe it immediately. She had to clean it before anyone noticed the stain. Just as she knelt, Leonardo took a step back after greeting the audience, and his shoe landed directly on the still wet streak. A dry, squish sound echoed. He stopped, his gaze dropping. The air froze. Elena looked up, her voice shaky. "I apologize. I will clean it up right away, Mr. Vega." He didn't reply. Slowly, he pulled a pristine white handkerchief from his vest pocket, bent down, and wiped the tip of his shoe. The action was meticulous, deliberately slow, like a performance. After wiping, he crumpled the handkerchief and dropped it straight into her bucket of dirty water. The water splashed up, hitting her hands, her hair, and her face. His voice was level, cold, and distant as a stone wall. "Do you know what the filthiest thing in this room is?" Elena remained silent. "It's you. You only deserve to wipe my feet." The words fell like a knife blade. Snickers rose from the back rows. A few reporters raised their cameras. Flashlights fired continuously, illuminating every droplet of water clinging to her face. Elena stood still. Her wet hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were fixed straight ahead, not flinching. She spoke, slowly, every word clear, like an oath carved in stone. "How ironic that the hands that once pulled you from death are now being used by you to be stepped on." The sound in the hall suddenly vanished. No one reacted in time. Then people turned to look at each other, murmurs spreading like a cold wind. Another server dropped a tray of glasses, the sound of breaking glass making the entire room shudder. Leonardo paused slightly. An image flashed through his mind. Murky water, a cry for help, a small hand pulling him out of the cold current, flickering, blurring, then disappearing. He sighed, forcing a smile. "You just saved yourself from the Vega Foundation." He turned away, leaving her amidst the wet floor and the gaze of hundreds of people. 2 security guards approached, lightly holding her shoulders. "Excuse me. Event regulations." Eleanor gently removed their hands, her voice soft but firm. "I know. Just let me finish wiping." She removed her torn gloves, placed them back in the bucket, and wiped the last coffee stain. Not for anyone, only out of the habit of finishing a task, even if she was about to be stripped of it. The manager stepped forward, his face flushed. "You are fired." "Immediately. No need to come back for your pay." His voice was louder than necessary, as if to prove his loyalty to authority. Elena looked up, her eyes red, not arguing, only asking softly, "Because I stained the floor, or because he wanted to see me disappear?" No one answered. She removed her employee badge and placed it on the reception counter. One colleague kept his head down, another turned his back. No one dared to look at her. The back door opened. A gust of cold wind rushed in, carrying the scent of early rain. Elena stepped out, her hands still smelling of bleach. It began to rain heavily. She stood under the awning for a moment, then stepped out. There was nothing left to keep her. Her wet shoes slipped off her feet. She took them off, carried them, and walked barefoot on the cold pavement. Raindrops mingled with her tears. She could no longer tell the difference. In her head, his words still echoed like a brand. "You only deserve to wipe my feet." She bit her lip until it bled. "I once saved a man from drowning," she thought to herself, "and today that very person stepped on me. But I will remember how to stand up." On the top floor, Leonardo still stood behind the glass, the wine glass in his hand, trembling slightly. Outside, the gala lights reflected through the glass into shimmering patches of light, flickering like a lake surface in the wind. He looked down, seeing the woman's figure grow smaller in the rain. His heart suddenly ached, a nameless feeling, as if someone had called him from a distant memory. The wine glass slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor, shattering. The smell of red wine spread like a stain of blood. He closed his eyes, hearing the rain beat against the glass, the sound merging with a dull ringing in his ears, and somewhere the sound of stirring water. "San Rafael," he whispered. The reflection on the glass blurred, turning into the murky water surface where a small hand had once grasped his years ago. Below, Elena's barefoot prints gradually faded and disappeared in the rain. The billboard reading, "Vega Group, bringing better opportunities for all," flickered in the strong wind. A corner of the banner was torn by the wind and folded back, leaving only 2 dimly lit words. Opportunity. A man who had just been hailed as a symbol of opportunity did not know that tonight he had personally trampled his last chance. And somewhere, in the persistent rain, those footprints remained etched on the stone. The path that would lead him back to the place he had tried to forget. San Rafael. But just a few hours later, when the ballroom floor was dry and the lights were off, everything changed, completely. Just a few hours after the Vega ballroom was cleaned, the clip recording Leonardo Vega throwing the white handkerchief into the bucket began to spread. Initially, it was just a blurry video from a guest, then hundreds, thousands of shares. By dawn, Leonardo Vega's name was on every headline. Social media never sleeps and never forgives. Newspapers simultaneously ran headlines, "Vega Billionaire, the man who humiliated a working woman over a pair of shoes." Vega Group's slogan, "Bringing a better future," became a laughingstock. The image of him bending down to wipe his shoe and then throwing the dirty handkerchief into the bucket was replayed continuously, like a sentence. An article was shared millions of times. The man, once called a symbol of compassion, is now the one who tramples on human dignity. Overnight, Vega Group's stock plummeted. Partners withdrew. Employees removed the Vega logo from their profiles. That empire, which Leonardo had spent half his life building, collapsed not because of a rival, but because of a dirty handkerchief. The next morning, Leonardo woke up in his silent penthouse. On the TV, his image appeared, his cold face, the woman kneeling. The announcer's voice was steady. "The Vega Group has not issued an official response." He turned off the TV, but Elena's words still echoed in his head. How ironic that the hands that once saved your life are now being used by you to be stepped on. That sentence made him stagger. Saved his life. He tried to remember, only seeing the water's surface, a cry for help, a small hand grasping him before everything went dark. An image flashed through his mind, causing him to pour and drink wine continuously, but the liquor could not erase the feeling. That afternoon, the 40th floor held an emergency meeting. The screen displayed a fiery red stock chart. Hector Alvarez, the CFO, his co-founder, was chillingly composed. The stock lost $200 million. The Vega Foundation has been requested for an audit, Hector said, his voice low and steady. A shareholder slammed his hand on the table. "If we don't act, Vega will collapse." The PR staff suggested, "We can stage an apology video, Mr. Vega visiting the girl, giving her flowers." The public needs emotion, not the truth. Leonardo's voice was cold. "I will not apologize because social media demands it." Hector smiled. "You don't need to be truly remorseful. You just need to play the part of the remorseful man." Leonardo let out a faint laugh. "A necessary drama?" "Necessary for survival," Hector replied. In the corner of the room, Clara Jimenez watched quietly. She had once received a scholarship from the Vega Foundation. The man she once admired was now only left with a hollow arrogance. As everyone left, she remained seated, looking down to the floor below. Employees rushed around as if putting out an invisible fire. She understood. They didn't want to put out the fire. They just wanted to cover the smoke long enough to sell off their remaining stock. At the same time, in her damp rented room, Eleanor sat in front of an old TV, the news report replaying the image of her kneeling. Outside the door, neighbors whispered, "That's her. Her picture is all over the internet." She pulled the curtain shut, hugging her knees. Diego ran over. "Sister, they say you're famous now." Elena forced a smile. "Being famous won't help us pay the rent, kid." As night fell, she packed a few belongings into a cloth bag. Not out of fear, but because she understood that the spotlight of public opinion could incinerate the innocent. She had to disappear, at least until she could find a safe place for Diego. At Vega Group, Hector read the report. She has left her residence, possibly in the south suburbs. "I'll have people look for her," Leonardo, not taking his eyes off the screen, only said softly, "Do it. I want to meet her before the reporters find her." He spoke as if directing a campaign, but inside, one haunting question repeated itself. Did she really save his life? In his mind, the blurry image of the lake reappeared, the cry for help, the cold air, the small hand gripping him. The wine glass in his hand shattered, blood oozing from his finger. Clara walked past, catching a glimpse of his eyes. Something had cracked in them. As the city was submerged in rain, Leonardo still stood by the window, looking down at the billboard, Vega Group, bringing a better future. A corner of the banner was torn by the wind and folded back, leaving only two dimly lit words. Opportunity. Below, someone had spray-painted in red, "Social media doesn't forget." He looked for a long time. Amidst the rain and the lights, he suddenly saw the lake reflected in the glass. Faint ripples, lapping waves, as if calling the name of something he once knew but had forgotten. Then his email lit up. An anonymous email had just arrived, the subject line containing only two words, San Rafael. The hunt for Elena Morales began immediately after the board of directors meeting. The glass tower of the Vega Group was lit up all night like a giant ship in a sea of fog. The security and PR departments were mobilized completely, divided into teams. One team scoured rental data, one team checked the list of contracted cleaning staff, and the third team monitored every social media comment. But they all fell into a void. Elena vanished off the map. No phone signal, no bank cards, no camera recorded her leaving the city. The media called her the Invisible Woman. And within the Vega Group, people whispered, "She's not hiding. She's waiting." Tuesday morning, Leonardo sat in his 40th floor office, his eyes glued to a thick investigation report. The coffee on his desk had gone cold. The words, "No trace found," repeated themselves, making his head buzz. He had never been defeated by anyone, yet now he was defeated by a woman carrying only a cloth bag. Since the clip went viral, he hadn't slept a full night. The comments hammered in his head. The empire of the ungrateful will collapse in the very puddle he created. Has anyone ever saved him? The last question made him freeze. Has anyone ever saved him? The phrase touched a hazy area of his memory, where there was cold water, a pounding heart, and a small hand pulling him up from the deep water. The phone rang. Hector. His voice was cold as steel. "We can't wait. Every day she's missing, her media value increases. If you don't control the situation, the board will force you out of the chairman's seat." "Find her." Leonardo. Leonardo leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "Do what you need to do." His voice was hoarse and tired, as if he himself didn't believe what he had just said. After Hector hung up, the room fell silent. The wind whistling through the window frames sounded like the roar of the crowd outside. The city was still bright, but to Leonardo, everything seemed muted. Only one name spun in his head: Elena Morales. A few blocks away, in a dilapidated rented room near the industrial park, Elena sat by the window. Car headlights cast dim streaks of light on the wall. Her hand rested on the old phone. The screen constantly lit up and went dark. Each time a new message from a reporter, from someone who wants to help, or from a news agency representative, she didn't open them. She knew exactly who they were, eyes hired to drag her into the light. Every night, she changed her sleeping place. Sometimes a small inn, sometimes a waiting chair in the hospital where Diego was being treated. She learned to blend into the crowd, wearing a street sweeper's coat, a low hat, carrying a faded cloth bag. Tonight, as she walked out the back door of the hospital, she saw a flash of light, a camera flash. A strange man held a phone, secretly taking pictures. Elena jumped. The man quickly approached, muttering, "You're Elena, right? I just want to ask a few questions." She immediately turned her back and ran. The sound of his shoes chasing her echoed, blending with the blare of night horns. She turned into a small alley, and the rain began to fall. Her shoes were soaked, the cloth bag bumped against her, but she didn't stop. When the man arrived, only the sound of falling water and an old scarf on the ground remained. She had disappeared behind the patchy brick wall. Her heart pounding, she hid in the darkness, looking down at her hands, the hands that had once saved a life, now trembling, because they had to save her own. "He doesn't know me," she told herself, "but I know who he is." The next morning, the news broadcast showed Leonardo speaking. "We are committed to transparency and continued contribution to society." His voice was even, emotionless. Elena looked at the screen, then turned off the TV. She didn't regret standing up that night, but she was tired. Tired of being turned into a symbol she didn't choose. Tired that every gaze was now only scrutiny, not compassion. Yet every time she saw his face, her hands trembled. She didn't know if it was from anger or from an old memory that kept resurfacing. The murky blue lake, the skinny boy struggling, the hoarse cough, and her hand gripping his. At the Vega group, Clara Jimenez sat in front of her computer screen, the white light reflecting on her tired face. She had spent the entire night reviewing personnel files under Hector's order. Her eyes burned, but she didn't stop. Then she saw it. A small data file hidden in the auxiliary storage system. Contract cleaning staff, Elena Morales. She opened the file. No permanent address. The emergency contact field had only one line. Diego Morales. She scrolled down a few more lines of notes, and when she reached the end, her heart hammered. Treatment costs paid via Vega Foundation Medical Aid Fund, San Rafael Hospital. She froze. Sweat beaded on her palms. San Rafael. That name sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't just a hospital. It was the place she had heard Leonardo mention in an interview years ago, where he said he almost drowned and was saved by a stranger. Clara's heart pounded. She zoomed in on the text, gently touching the screen as if afraid it would disappear. "It can't be," she whispered. "It can't be such a coincidence." She printed out the file, her hand trembling so much that the paper rustled. Then she ran to Leonardo's office, her heart still racing. He was sitting in the dark, with only the light from the screen reflecting on his tired face. "What is it?" he asked, his voice deep. "I think—" "You should see this," Clara said, placing the stack of papers on his desk. He opened it. Her name. Her brother's name. And the final line, San Rafael Hospital. A chill ran down his spine. His hand clenched the paper, sweat beading on his temple. In his mind, a fragment of memory flashed. The water's surface, the cry for help, the small hand pulling him up, the weak breath of the little girl on the lake shore. He stood up, walking to the window. The city beneath his feet blurred, leaving only a dim light, like the water surface all those years ago. "San Rafael," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "That place again." Clara looked at him, her eyes mixed with worry and pity. "Do you know this place?" He didn't answer. The lighter in his hand clicked constantly, but the flame kept going out. He let out a laugh, a tired, empty sound. "Perhaps I do know it," he said. "Or perhaps that place knows me better than I know myself." He turned back to the desk, looking at the words, Elena Morales, San Rafael Hospital, one more time, as if looking into his own buried memory. Smoke floated, obscuring the paper, obscuring his face, the powerful man trembling because of a past he could not deny. "She isn't running from me," he said softly. "She's forcing me to remember." Outside, the rain fell again. Droplets hit the window glass, small, steady, persistent. The whole city seemed to sink into a mist, with only one name echoing, San Rafael. And for the first time, Leonardo Vega felt fear, not because of the scandal, but because he had a premonition that he was about to meet the person he should have never forgotten. Leonardo did not waste a minute after reading that name. San Rafael. The two words were like a knife piercing through the layer of memory he had skillfully buried for years. He wasn't sure he wanted to remember, but his body trembled as if the past had found a way to breathe again. The trip was kept absolutely confidential. No media, no PR team, no bodyguards. Only Clara went with him, the only person quiet enough for him to tolerate during the night flight. It was just before dawn when they landed in the coastal town. The sky was covered in grey mist, and the faint streetlights shone on a rusted sign, Bienvenidos a San Rafael. The town was like an old, unhealed wound, walls stained with salt, wooden windows half closed, and the distant sound of waves, steady as the rhythm of memory. Leonardo rented an old pickup truck, The road leading to the community center wound between sand dunes and cactus ridges. He said nothing, only drove. Clara looked at him a few times, but did not dare to ask. His eyes were fixed on the steering wheel, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere, where there was the smell of seaweed and the sound of water whistling in a 10-year-old child's lungs. "Are you sure you want to be here?" Clara asked softly. Leonardo only replied, his voice husky, "Perhaps I never left." The Esperanza Community Center nestled by the beach, its blue-painted walls faded. A grey-haired man was arranging plastic chairs on the porch. When Leonardo approached, he looked up. His eyes froze for a moment. "I know you," the man said, his voice not exactly welcoming. "The whole country knows you." Leonardo nodded slightly. "I came to see someone. Elena Morales. I just want to talk. She doesn't want anyone looking for her, especially someone like you," the man replied, his hand pausing on the chair, his eyes mixed with curiosity and caution. Leonardo took out an envelope, placing it gently on the table. "This isn't ransom. It's compensation. For her and her brother." The man glanced at the envelope, then looked at him again, a bitter smile flashing. "Here, people don't sell their silence, Mr. Vega. But if you're lucky, you might find her at the old park near the lake." In the afternoon, the wind blew strongly from the sea, bringing the taste of salt. Leonardo walked along the stone-paved road leading to the lake. The water surface was calm, murky blue, reflecting heavy grey clouds. The smell of seaweed, dampness, and wind blended together, making his chest contract. He had almost died here, and perhaps was also born again from this very spot. Eleanor was waiting. She didn't run away, didn't flinch. She just stood with her arms crossed, the wind gently lifting her low ponytail. She was thinner, her eyes serene, but within that serenity was something like a knife blade. "You don't need to apologize," she said before he could speak. "Just stop acting." Leonardo was silent. He looked at her for a long time. The wind blew through, her jacket hem lightly trembling. Each breath stretched an unnameable distance between them. Finally, he spoke, his voice slow, deep as smoke. "Acting is the only way I know to survive. You can't destroy the entire world I built just for a memory. You call a child saving you from drowning a memory." Eleanor frowned, her voice choked. "I call it a life. And now, you use that life to buy more stock." Leonardo bowed his head. In his eyes, her face was no longer that of an angry woman, but a repeating image of the little girl years ago. Soaked, gasping for breath, her eyes full of fear, yet resolute. He saw himself, trembling like the boy lying by the lake, grateful to no one, only fearful. "I came here," he said softly, "because I have to end this. I can pay all the expenses for Diego, take care of him for life. In return, you sign this agreement, and I will apologize publicly." Eleanor laughed, a short, dry, cold laugh. "You still think everything can be bought. I don't need money, and I don't need an apology. I just want you to live truthfully, at least once." In that moment, the wind stopped blowing. Only the distant sound of waves remained, and their breathing echoed thin as a thread. Elena looked down at his hands now clean, cold, and empty, unlike the hand that had grasped hers underwater all those years ago. "Do you remember?" she asked, her voice smaller, yet so profound it choked him. "Remember what?" "The feeling when you took my hand, just as you were about to drown." Leonardo closed his eyes slightly. In the darkness, the memory rushed back, clear and painful. The water's surface, the whistling wind, the rapid breathing, and the tiny hand gripping him tightly. When he opened his eyes, his lashes were wet. "Perhaps I forgot how to be grateful," he said, his voice husky. They stood facing each other in a long, suffocating silence, and in that stillness, Fate crept back in. From a distance, the sound of an engine roared. Elena subtly turned her head. A flash of light in the mist, then another flash. The air was cut by the dry click of a camera. Leonardo froze. He looked around, seeing several figures moving slowly from the park entrance, their lenses pointed at them. Clara shouted from afar, "Reporters, let's go!" But it was too late. The camera flashes fired continuously, like a burst of light rain over the lake. A voice shouted from a distance, "Mr. Vega! Are you truly sorry, or are you just putting on a show?" Leonardo was stunned. His breath hitched. He turned to Elena, his voice choked. "Get out of here, now." Elena stood still. In the flashing light, her face was strangely calm. She said nothing, only looked at him for a long time. A look that made him understand that no reporter, no video could humiliate him more than that gaze. Then she turned away. Her footsteps were light, decisive, and merged into the rain. Leonardo still stood there, watching her shadow fade, and for the first time he realized he was no longer the hunted, but the seeker of the very humanity he had lost. The last flash fired, reflecting his face in the water. Tired eyes, a fractured shadow. And as the rain intensified, he spoke softly, not to anyone, but to himself. "She isn't running away. She's just teaching me how to fear in the distance." The surface of San Rafael Lake churned. And somewhere in the sound of the wind, there was an echo of the past, like a melody that never ended. When night fell, the video of the apology by San Rafael Lake spread across the internet, but the only sentence people heard clearly was Leonardo's voice, choked and frighteningly real. "I forgot how to be grateful." And that was the beginning of the biggest fall of his life. The recording spread at the speed of wind. In the clip, Leonardo's voice sounded cold and empty. "I don't need to be sincere. I just need them to believe that I am remorseful." That single sentence was enough to burn everything down. The storm of criticism returned manifold. No one talked about his arrogant action at the gala anymore. Now, the whole world talked about his pretense and manipulation. Vega Group, once a symbol of success, now became the perfect example of charity to wash away sins. Stock prices plummeted uncontrollably. A series of sell-offs from large funds evaporated billions of dollars from the group's value in a few days. Branches in South America and Europe simultaneously ceased operations. The windows of the main headquarters were covered with protest banners. And inside, every eye began to look at Leonardo, not with reverence, but with fear mixed with contempt. But the pain didn't stop there. Elena Morales, the person who only wanted to leave the spotlight, was dragged back into the storm's eye. Paparazzi surrounded the suburbs, photographing her and Diego in their temporary apartment. The media, skillfully guided by articles from sources close to Vega Group, attached a new label to her: the greedy opportunistic who destroyed an empire out of avarice. The children in the rented block started pointing fingers, and Diego had to stop going to school. Stolen photos spread across the internet, turning the two siblings into public amusement. Eleanor understood. Silence could no longer protect anyone. She could not let Leonardo's deception destroy her life again. She arranged to meet Clara Jimenez, the only person in the Vega Group who didn't seem like the others. In the small coffee shop in the old quarter, the smell of coffee mingled with the damp air. Elena sat by the window, her hand gripping a cup of warm water. When Clara arrived, she spoke directly, without beating around the bush. "They found us. And now, my brother is paying the price for his drama." Clara looked at her, her eyes tired, but sincere. "I'm sorry, Elena. I tried to make him face the truth, but his arrogance is too great. He believes everything can be bought, even remorse." Elena was silent for a moment, then asked, her voice husky, "Why are you helping me? Are you loyal to him, or to yourself?" Clara placed her coffee cup down, her hands slightly trembling. "I'm helping, because I owe you, and because I owe my own conscience. I used to volunteer at the San Rafael camp. I heard the story about the hands that saved a life. At the time, I didn't know that child was him, until now." Eleanor looked at her, her eyes glistening. "Do you think he can still change?" Clara replied slowly, her voice choked. "I don't know. But the truth must still be told. For him, for you, and for the child who almost died at San Rafael." While the two women talked, on the top floor of the Vega building, Leonardo faced a silent collapse. He stood in front of the mirror, looking at himself in the dim light. His face was gaunt, his eyes dark-rimmed, his stubble unshaved, and his gaze lost. He gave a faint smile, almost whispering to his reflection, "Hector always taught me how to control risk." And now, he has become the biggest risk himself. He turned on the large screen, replaying the recording of the meeting at the park. Every sound, every light, every angle. It was all too perfect. Nothing was coincidental. No reporter could have gotten close without someone guiding them. He recalled the emergency meeting after the first scandal, where Hector sat quietly observing, then softly uttered the two words, "Image campaign." That look, it wasn't that of an ally. It was the look of someone who knew the ending beforehand. Leonardo slowly played the audio file of Hector's voice from the old meeting. You don't need to be remorseful. Just play the part of the remorseful man. Now, listening to those words again, a chill ran down his spine. The leaked tape could not be a mere coincidence. It was a deliberate stab. A blow calculated using the very weapon he had once used to control others. Image. For the first time in his life, Leonardo understood what it meant to be hunted. He didn't use the company's security team. They might all have been bought off by Hector. He called his private security team, the people who had been with him since he started his career. "Investigate Hector," he ordered. "Every transaction, every meeting, even his personal accounts. And Elena, too. I need to know what San Rafael really is, and why everything keeps coming back to that place." His voice was deep, decisive. But when he hung up, his hands trembled slightly. He knew clearly this was no longer a media war, but a war for survival. Meanwhile, Clara was also gambling her entire career. Hector, now also serving as the interim PR director, began to tighten internal control. All data access was monitored, and cameras operated 24/7. But Clara couldn't wait. She needed evidence before Hector could destroy everything. Late at night, she sneaked into the personal records archive in the basement. The sensor lights only came on when someone passed. The sound of her heels echoed softly in the hallway. She opened each cabinet, looking for the El Vega file. As her hand reached the locked cabinet, she heard footsteps echoing. The camera light flashed red. She jumped, her heart pounding. No time to think. Clara used a hairpin to pick the lock, opening the cabinet. An old, dusty wooden box was revealed. She opened the lid. Inside were a few childhood items, a broken watch, a faded, damp piece of cloth, and an old, yellowed photograph. In the photo, there was a skinny boy, his face frightened, Leonardo as a child, next to a little girl holding her younger brother, her smile gentle, but her eyes serious, Elena and Diego. Behind the photo was a faded ink inscription, San Rafael Shelter. She flipped through the files at the bottom of the box. Inside were documents related to the local welfare fund, clearly stating the names of Elena Morales' parents as the first donors for the Orphans Relief Project in San Rafael. They were the ones who provided the first loan for Leonardo Vega after the accident that year, helping him continue his studies, creating the initial step for his later career. Clara stood still, her throat tightened. Leonardo didn't just humiliate the person who saved his life. He built an entire empire on the foundation of that girl's family's kindness. A beep sounded. The camera turned. She spun around, the light shining directly on her face. The back door swung open. Natalia, Hector's personal assistant, appeared. "What are you doing here?" Natalia asked, her voice sharp as a knife. Clara swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. I was assigned to review old data. Hector told me to check the sponsorship files." Natalia stared for a few seconds, then gave a slight smirk. "Is that so?" "I will confirm with Hector." Clara nodded, maintaining a forced smile. When Natalia left, she quickly took out her phone, photographed all the documents, and then placed the photo and files back in their exact positions. She closed the cabinet, leaving just as the patrol alarm sounded. Back home, her hands were still trembling. She opened her laptop and sent an anonymous email to Leonardo's personal address. No explanation, no comment, only one attached file, the photo and the scan of the documents. The email subject was short, cold, and aimed directly at the heart of the man who once thought himself invincible. "You are standing on the foundation of the person you humiliated." She pressed send. The screen lit up, then went dark. Outside, thunder rumbled over the city sky. On the 40th floor, Leonardo sat alone. The notification sound for a new email rang out. He opened his inbox and saw that subject line. When the photo appeared, his hand froze. Before his eyes was the face of a 10-year-old boy, himself, next to the little girl and her younger brother. The pale sunlight in the photo had faded, but the look in the little girl's eyes was still bright, clear and true. Leonardo couldn't breathe. His throat constricted. He understood that everything collapsed, not because the world turned its back, but because the truth had finally caught up with him. A lightning bolt tore across the sky, reflecting on the office glass, leaving the shadow of a man collapsing, not because of the scandal, but because he had lost the only thing that could save him: gratitude. The next morning, Hector walked into the meeting room with a victorious smile. But on the large screen, in front of the entire board of directors, Leonardo displayed the San Rafael photo, a photo Hector had never seen. "Today," he said softly, "we will talk about the truth." Early the next morning, Leonardo cancelled all meetings, turned off his phone, and drove out of the city alone. He wore an old jacket, no bodyguards, no announcements. The highway was misty, the signs fading behind him. When he arrived, San Rafael was not like it was in his memory. It was smaller, quieter, and much poorer. Houses with corrugated iron roofs, walls covered in sea salt, the smell of dry seaweed drifting in the wind. The coastline was foggy, and in the distance was the old, dilapidated wall of the orphanage that had closed since 2005. The rusted iron gate was chained shut, the broken sign with the words "Shelter" fading under peeling paint. Weeds covered the pathway, and with every step, his footfall echoed the sound of pebbles hitting metal, the hollow sound of an unburied memory. He bent down, his hand gently brushing the dust off the rusted plaque. Under the silver paint, a few words remained. Primary donor, the Morales family. Just 5 words, but it felt like the whole world collapsed. He stood still for a long time, his eyes blurring, unsure if it was from the wind or tears. Behind him, there was the sound of footsteps. A voice, hoarse but deep and warm like old wood, rang out. "You still remember the way back, Leonardo Vega?" He turned around. An old priest was standing under the shade of a Terminalia catappa tree, holding rose pruning shears. His eyes were kind, but in his gaze was an understanding that needed no judgment. "Father, Matteo," he asked softly, his voice strained. "I am still here," he smiled. "Everyone else left. Only memory refuses to go." The priest didn't ask why he had come. He just handed him an old pair of gloves, saying, "Help me trim these withered branches." They grow back very quickly. Leonardo silently complied. The two pruned the dry rose branches. Occasionally the wind blew, carrying the distant sound of the church bell. After a while, the priest finally spoke, his voice light as if telling a story about someone else. "A long time ago, a boy fell into the lake. A little girl rushed down and pulled him up. The girl's parents then came here, helped renovate the camp, and established a small fund for the orphans. They called that fund the Foundation of Kindness." Leonardo stopped. Father Matteo pointed toward the lake behind the trees, where the murky blue water reflected the grey sky. "You owed this place a thank you," he said, "but you chose to leave without a word." The words held no reproach, only a truth, gentle but painful. Leonardo walked towards the lake, the cold wind blowing into his coat. He bent down to look at the water, and all the memories were switched back on. The splashing water, the small hand gripping his, the rapid breathing, the frightened yet determined eyes of Elena, and the face of the man who had offered him his first opportunity. He knelt by the water's edge, his hands trembling slightly. The feeling was not remorse, but the pain of realizing he had lived too long in oblivion. While he was still standing there, his phone vibrated. Hector's number. Leonardo intended to hang up, but an intuition made him answer. Hector's voice was urgent and hoarse. "Where are you?" Natalia knows. Leonardo froze. Natalia, the woman who used to be Vega Group's PR director, who once loved him in silence, then left when Hector appeared. Now, she had become his right hand, a sharp and ruthless person. "What does she know?" Leonardo asked, his voice low. "About San Rafael. She found the old files in the system and is destroying everything. Clara can't intervene. If you don't return, all the evidence will disappear. Hector is using Natalia to completely lock you out." The voice on the other end, cut out with static, but every word was clear. Leonardo looked out at the lake, the wind stirring the water into hundreds of small ripples. All his life he had run from the truth, and now, when he had just touched it, they wanted to bury it forever. He hung up, standing still for a moment. The wind blew harder, scattering the dry rose petals on the ground. Father Matteo looked at him, saying softly, "You don't need light to see the truth, Leonardo. It's still there, just waiting for you to be brave enough to look it in the eye." He nodded, his eyes still fixed on the lake surface. "I won't run anymore," he said softly. "This time, I will stand with it." He turned away, walking out of the churchyard, his shoes heavy with mud and water. Behind him, the priest's voice still echoed, deep and distant. "Go, Leonardo. There are sins that cannot be erased, but can be redeemed by protecting what is right." His car turned off the red dirt road. The sea wind kicked up dust, the afternoon light streaking through the foggy window. On the passenger seat, the old yellowed photo lay silently in his jacket pocket. Leonardo knew clearly. When he returned to the city, he would not only confront Hector or Natalia, but also his own former self, the man who once believed that everything could be controlled, except the truth. The sky ahead gradually darkened, and for the first time in many years, Leonardo Vega was no longer afraid of the dark. When Leonardo returned to the city, the Vega building was brightly lit as if it were day. But in the lobby, every screen displayed a single image, the San Rafael photo, and in the bottom right corner, an anonymous line, "The truth does not need light. It only needs one person brave enough to speak it." That night, Leonardo drove back to the city in a state of utter turmoil. Every memory of San Rafael flooded back, so clear and painful that he had to stop the car in the middle of the road, burying his head in the steering wheel. He didn't just remember Elena's face underwater, but also the look of her father, the man who had trusted a boy with nothing but his bare hands. That very trust had given him his first loan, his first opportunity, and he had built the entire Vega empire on the foundation of that debt of gratitude. Now, that realization didn't make him proud, but made him despise himself. While he was returning, in the Vega building, the conspiracy was nearing completion. Natalia sat in the PR room, the screen light reflecting on her cold face. She used to be Leonardo's ex-lover, the one who knew every habit, every quiet moment of his. The day he left her to chase fame, Natalia only smiled and left in silence. But that silence was never surrender. It was a wound that turned into memory. When Hector appeared, with his calm smile and knife-sharp eyes, she recognized something familiar in him. "Both of us," Hector once told her, "understand what it feels like to be underestimated by Leonardo Vega." And they shook hands. Not for money, but for the justice of the abandoned. Natalia wanted to destroy the perfect image Leonardo had used to lull everyone. Hector wanted to seize the empire, not by force, but by the very truth he had distorted. Together they crafted the script, turning Elena into a blackmailer and Leonardo into a self-destructive victim. The next morning, Leonardo returned to the city. The capital's lights reflected on the car window like 1,000 eyes watching him. He knew everything was slipping out of control, stock prices plummeting, the board of shareholders demanding an emergency meeting, and Hector and Natalia controlling the entire Vega Group media system. He walked into the office. Every gaze avoided his. Clara was not there, only leaving him a handwritten note. "Eleanor still believes in the truth, even if it causes her pain." The words made him clench the steering wheel, then release it. He couldn't leave her alone. Clara had arranged a meeting for him. Secret, no cameras, no bodyguards, at an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts. The sky was overcast, with light rain falling. Leonardo arrived early, standing alone amidst the rusted planks, the wind whistling through the cracks in the door. He was no longer the billionaire in a luxurious suit, but a naked man, tired and afraid. When Elena walked in, the light from the doorway shone on her face. She was thinner, her eyes dark-rimmed, but still bright, like someone who had endured too much pain, but still tried to stand tall. "I remembered," he said immediately, his voice husky. "I went to San Rafael. I met Father Mateo. I remember the drowning incident, and your father. He trusted me, helped me." "Start over." Elena stood still. Her face didn't change color, only her eyes slightly trembled when she heard her father's name. "And what did you do with that trust?" she asked, her voice calm. Leonardo took a step forward, his voice more urgent. "They, Hector and Natalia, are setting a trap. They will turn you into a blackmailer and wipe out all traces of the truth at San Rafael. I can't stop it alone. You are the living evidence, the only person who can help me turn everything around." Elena looked at him, so long that the air in the warehouse thickened. "You need me," she said slowly, "to save the company, or to save yourself." The question dropped, sharp as a knife. Leonardo didn't answer. In the silence, his hands trembled slightly, not out of fear, but from knowing he had no more excuses left. Elena saw that. In that moment, something in her softened, just for a flash, when she realized the man in front of her no longer had the posture of a ruler, but a human being learning how to bow his head. "Perhaps," she said softly, "the only thing I can do to help is to let you face the truth. But don't misunderstand. I'm not on your side. I'm on the side of justice." Leonardo nodded, his eyes as still as the old lake surface. "That's enough," he replied, almost whispering, "because justice is also what I owe you." Meanwhile, on the 40th floor of the Vega Group, Hector and Natalia prepared for the largest shareholder meeting in the group's history. The conference room was glass enclosed, lit with bright yellow light. Natalia stood by the window, looking down at the traffic below, holding a glass of red wine. "Are you sure," she asked, "that when he falls, you won't fall with him?" Hector placed a file on the table, not looking at her. "Leonardo built this company on an illusion. I'm just returning it to reality." Natalia smiled lightly, but it was a sad smile. "Reality is never clean, Hector. You know that too, and love. Is it cleaner?" He turned to look at her. She was silent. A fleeting moment of weakness crossed her eyes, but then disappeared as quickly as it appeared. In that moment, Natalia realized what she had always denied. She still loved Leonardo, even though that love had rotted into hatred. And perhaps because of that, she couldn't stop. On the other side of the city, Clara sat in her small office, the light from the screen shining on her face. She had finished copying all the files, the testimony of Father Matteo, along with the bank documents proving the initial loan from Elena's father to Leonardo. Everything was ready, but she hesitated before pressing the send button. She knew that once this truth was released, the Vega Group would collapse. Leonardo would lose everything, but Hector and Natalia would also have no way out. She whispered, as if talking to herself, "None of you are innocent." But the truth belongs to no one. Then she pressed send. Leonardo's phone vibrated just as he stepped out of the warehouse. The screen displayed Clara's email. He opened it, seeing the subject line, short, cold, and like a thunderbolt in the rainy night. "You are living on the money and gratitude of the person you humiliated." Leonardo froze in the middle of the empty road, the rain beginning to fall heavily. He read the line over and over, then looked up, seeing himself reflected in the car window, a man with nothing left to defend himself with, only a naked truth that he had to bring to light. The night before the shareholder meeting, the atmosphere in the city felt compressed. Rain pattered on the car windows, and the streetlights stretched into long streaks of light. Leonardo stood in front of his office window, holding the phone with the old photo of the Morales family. He had never seen eyes in a photo that were both gentle and contained what he had lost: trust. On the other side of the city, Elena sat by Diego's bedside. The boy coughed constantly, the nightly fevers lasting longer than usual. She knew her brother's health was deteriorating, but she hadn't dared to tell anyone. When Diego slept, she gently placed her hand on his forehead, whispering, "Everything will be all right, little one. I promise." In her heart, Elena had never felt so small. On one side was the battle for justice. On the other was the only life of her remaining family member. The next morning, the 50th floor of the Vega Group was brightly lit. The shareholder meeting began in a heavy atmosphere. Hector stood in the middle of the room, his demeanor confident, his familiar cold smile. Beside him, Natalia, in a pale white dress, her face expressionless, looked down at the documents, her hands tightly clasped as if trying to maintain composure. Hector began speaking in a chillingly calm voice. "We are witnessing the consequences of weakness in management and ethics. It is time for the Vega Group to have a new leader, unencumbered by emotional scandals." Natalia stood up, her voice clear and firm. "We have evidence that Elena Morales, a former cleaning staff member, conspired to blackmail Mr. Vega with forged documents. She is collaborating with the press to smear the company's reputation." Murmurs immediately spread across the table. Shareholders bent their heads, flipped through documents, their eyes bewildered. For a brief moment, Hector and Natalia exchanged a look, the look of those who believed they had won. The door to the meeting room swung open. Leonardo walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit, nor a tie, just a dark shirt and eyes as still as water. The entire room paused. Hector gave a half smile. "So you made it? I thought you chose to run away." Leonardo didn't reply. He walked straight to the podium, placing a small device on the control table. "No long speech is needed," he said, his voice deep and clear. "Let's look directly at the truth." He pressed a button. All the screens in the meeting room lit up simultaneously. A video appeared. Images from an internal security camera. A scene of Hector and Natalia in a dark office, their voices ringing out clearly. "Delete all data related to San Rafael. If that truth gets out, Vega will collapse." What about Elena Morales? Turn her into a blackmailer? No one checks the kindness of a poor person. The sound dropped like a hammer blow. The room was silent. Hector turned pale. Natalia bowed her head, her lips trembling slightly. Leonardo looked around, needing no more evidence. He spoke softly, word by word, as if confessing to himself, "I was once saved by kindness, and I betrayed it. Today I am returning what I took." He looked up. "I resign." Immediately, a wave of commotion spread through the room, but he paid no attention. "I am also transferring all my personal shares to a new fund, the Morales Foundation, to help laborers and orphan children, because the kindness of a family like theirs made me who I am today, and I stained it." No one applauded. No need. The silence was heavy enough as a verdict. Security guards entered. Hector and Natalia were led away under the flashing camera lights. Natalia turned back once. Her eyes no longer held hatred, only emptiness. Hector looked at Leonardo with a mix of shock and respect, like someone realizing he had been defeated by his opponent's own intelligence. That afternoon, as the press began to report, "Billionaire Vega resigns and donates fortune," Elena received a text message from Clara. "It's over." He told the truth. Elena sat still for a long time. No joy, no anger, just emptiness. Then Diego's cough pulled her back to reality. The boy was weaker than yesterday, his skin pale, his breathing heavy. "Are you okay?" she asked, trying to hide her worry. Diego smiled weakly. "You were right." When people are sincere, good things happen. The sentence was like an omen. Just an hour later, Diego suddenly lost consciousness. Elena panicked, calling for an ambulance. She ran after the gurney through the hospital hallway, the siren and the sound of shoes echoing. In the emergency room, the doctor stepped out, speaking quickly. "The boy needs an urgent bone marrow transplant. Otherwise, we won't be able to save him." Elena choked. "But we don't have a suitable donor." The doctor looked at her, then said softly, as if he too was surprised, "We checked the extended donor testing results. There is a complete genetic match. He has already arrived and signed the consent forms for the surgery." Elena looked up, her voice trembling. Who is it?" The doctor looked at her and replied, "He said, he just wants you to know that he owes this family a life." The operating room door closed. Through the opaque glass, Elena saw the figure of the man lying on the bed next to Diego, his face hidden by a surgical mask, yet those trembling hands she recognized immediately. Leonardo Vega. Outside, the rain began to fall again. Water streamed down the glass, merging with the weakening heartbeat on the monitor. Elena stood silently, no longer angry, only feeling her heart heavy. Finally, perhaps all debts had been paid, not with money, not with fame, but with a life and a belated word of gratitude. When she received the call from the hospital, Elena nearly dropped her phone. She rushed out of the Vega Group building, leaving Leonardo amidst the crowd and the camera flashes of the press. All the hatred, all the anger she had accumulated, vanished. At that moment, she was no longer the humiliated woman or the witness to justice. She was only a sister racing against time to save her little brother. Diego was rushed into the emergency room upon arrival. The hereditary blood disease had reached a critical stage. The doctor's words were gentle, but like a thunderclap. If we don't perform a bone marrow transplant within the next 48 hours, we fear we won't be able to save him. Elena slumped into a chair, her hands tightly clasped, her lips trembling, and unable to speak. In her mind, there was only one sound, Diego's heartbeat when he was little, and her old promise, "I won't let you lose a mother again." A few days after resigning as CEO, Leonardo lived in silence. The Vega Group was handed over to a transition committee, while he began overseeing the operations of the Morales Foundation, the charity fund named after his former benefactors. People said he was making amends, but Leonardo himself knew it wasn't penance. It was a different way of life, where he forced himself to see real faces, real hands, every day. When he heard the news of Diego's critical condition, he didn't think. He just went. He appeared at the hospital in an old shirt, his face gaunt. No bodyguards, no reporters, nothing left of the Vega Group, only the naked man trying to fix the impossible. Eleanor saw him, her eyes tired but still firm. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. You've done enough. This battle is over." Leonardo stopped, his voice low and calm. "That boy deserves to live, Elena. And I have a responsibility to him, more than you realize." He didn't look into her eyes when he spoke, but Elena heard something different in his voice, no longer the scent of power, only the sincerity of a man who had surrendered to his own conscience. That afternoon, Clara came to the hospital with a folder of medical records. She was in charge of managing the Morales Fund, so she was informed about the search for a compatible bone marrow donor. When she saw the results, she froze. The words at the top of the paper slowed her heart rate. She went looking for Leonardo, but when she found him in the empty hallway, she stopped halfway. He was sitting alone on the waiting bench, his hands clasped, his eyes staring blankly. Something in him had softened, not fear, but a calmness before a decided choice. Clara walked closer, intending to speak, but Leonardo only said softly, his voice so light it was almost a whisper, "No need to say anything. I already know." He looked at her, his eyes tired but clear. "That boy is a debt I must pay. Prepare all the procedures, but don't tell Elena." She will never agree. Clara was about to say something, then stopped. She understood. Some truths were not meant to be spoken yet. She just nodded, her eyes welling up. An hour later, the hospital hallway became strangely silent. The surgical lights shone through the opaque glass, reflecting on Elena's face as she huddled in the corner. She didn't know that in the operating room on the other side, separated by a thin wall, Leonardo was lying under the white lights, his body connected to tubes, his hands resting neatly by the side of the bed. Before the anesthesia, the doctor asked softly, "Do you want to leave any message?" Leonardo smiled slightly, his voice hoarse, but maintaining a calm rhythm. "If she forgives, please don't say anything. Just let her live well." The surgical lights illuminated his face, then gradually blurred as the anesthetic spread through his body. A tear fell from the corner of his eye, mixing with the blood flowing from his body, the blood that was once saved by kindness, now returning to save another life. Outside, the rain began to fall. Elena sat in the hallway, her hands clasped, softly mumbling a prayer. The steady beeping from Diego's monitor echoed from the operating room, blending with the sound of the clock ticking through every second. Every time the door opened, she started and looked up. She had no idea that behind that wall another heart was beating in sync with her brother's, a heart once covered by arrogance, now quietly draining itself. In the operating room, white lights covered Leonardo's face. The doctor said softly, "Begin the transfusion." A stream of dark red blood flowed from his body into the tube. Everything was quiet. No more talking, no more camera flashes, no more Vega group, no more San Rafael. Only a man returning the humanity he had once lost to the world. As the surgery lasted into midnight, Clara still sat in the hallway, not leaving. She was the only one who knew that the two lives in those two rooms were connected. She looked through the opaque glass, seeing Elena dozing on the chair, her hands still tightly gripping her prayer beads. Clara whispered softly, "May God let both of them wake up, because they deserve forgiveness." The night wind blew through the long corridor, carrying the smell of disinfectant and the coldness of survival. Somewhere in the deep parts of the hospital, two hearts, one that had saved, one that was being saved, beat as one. 3 months passed. Autumn turned, bringing peace after the storm. Diego had fully recovered after the successful bone marrow transplant. Elena, with the support of the Morales Foundation, turned her dream into reality. She opened a free music class for orphaned and disadvantaged children, naming it Harmony House. She was no longer the humiliated cleaning staff member. She was a woman who found purpose and joy in healing old wounds. One morning, Elena cleaned out the drawer containing Diego's medical records. She found a supplementary folder of papers from the hospital. Inside, there was an official thank you note addressed to the patient's family. "Thank you to the anonymous donor, LV." She trembled. She had always known the donor had a perfectly compatible blood type, but she had never dared to ask. LV Leonardo Vega. She couldn't believe it, but all the pieces fit together. His silent appearance at the hospital, the order to withhold his identity, and his departure from the company immediately after the surgery. He had used his own life and health to save her brother. Elena burst into tears. Tears not of humiliation, but of relief and gratitude. In those 3 months, Leonardo had completely disappeared from the public eye. The press occasionally reported, "Billionaire Vega leaves the country, whereabouts unknown." He needed time to recover his health and find himself again. Clara visited Eleanor on the afternoon of the first fundraising concert for Harmony House. "He's doing well," Clara said softly. "He couldn't stay in the old city. But he sent you this." Clara handed Eleanor a small, simple wooden box. Elena opened the box. Inside was a broken piano key, the key she had sold years ago to buy medicine for Diego. Along with it was a folded piece of paper, handwritten by Leonardo. "I once ruined the melody halfway through. If you allow it, I want to play the last note." Elena tightly gripped the key in her hand. He didn't need words. He needed connection. That evening, the concert began. Harmony House was packed with guests who came to support and children. Elena sat down at the old piano. She began to play a nocturne, the piece associated with her peaceful childhood memories, a sorrowful yet hopeful melody. At the climax, where she often stopped because her emotions were interrupted, a man's piano note unexpectedly rang out, joining her melody. The tune continued smoothly, full of emotion, filling the gap perfectly. Elena stopped playing and turned around. Leonardo stood there. He was thinner, but his eyes no longer held that cold arrogance, but were gentle and bright. He wore simple clothes, with no trace of the billionaire. He walked slowly toward her. "The first time I threw water on you was out of arrogance," Leonardo said, his voice slightly trembling with emotion. "This time, I just want to wash those hands clean, to hold you forever." He knelt down, not kneeling to beg for forgiveness, but kneeling to propose. He pulled out a ring made from the old piano key she had sold. "You once gave me breath, gave me a chance. Today, I only ask to breathe the rest of my life with you. Please give me the opportunity to truly be worthy of this life," Elena cried. She didn't need a public apology or wealth. She needed sincerity. She nodded. The piano music continued, the complete nocturne, for the first time after 15 years of being unfinished. The stage lights dimmed, their hands intertwined on the keyboard. Diego stood behind them, smiling radiantly, and the children quietly sang along to the melody. Some melodies only play when people are brave enough to forgive, and some people are only truly rich when they know how to bow their heads. Leonardo found that wealth, not in the Vega group, but in this harmony house. A small text appeared on the concert screen, dedicated to those who were saved and found the humanity to say thank you. We have witnessed the circle of karma close, not through harsh punishment, but through gentle healing. Leonardo Vega, the arrogant billionaire, finally understood that the biggest debt in his life was not financial, but a debt of gratitude and kindness. He lost an entire glamorous empire to find something simpler, the truth about himself. For Elena, forgiveness did not come from a public apology, but from an unconditional act of sacrifice. She not only found safety for her brother, but also received recognition for her family's compassion. The ring made from the old piano key is a testament to a simple truth. What is broken by money and fame can only be healed by humility and love from the heart. He began his life with the help of others, and now he chose to end his old facade by saving the one who saved him. The lesson learned through the story of the dirty shoe and the pure heart is this: sometimes we need to lose everything to realize what we truly need. Wealth is not in what we possess, but in how we treat those who seem less fortunate than ourselves. And looking at Elena's arduous journey and Leonardo's difficult redemption, we hope this story is not just a moment of entertainment, but also a gentle reminder. Have you, our dear audience, taken the time to look back at the silent benefactors in your life, those small acts of kindness that you may have unintentionally forgotten? Keep your hearts open and never let arrogance overshadow compassion. Thank you for joining us through 10 chapters of this emotional story. We always look forward to hearing your thoughts and feelings. We wish you a peaceful, warm day, and always remember, truth and kindness, no matter how long they are buried, will eventually find the light.